good to go. Good afternoon. I now call to order the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. And we are going to start with a land acknowledgement. And we have a special guest, Caitlin Van Gaal. Welcome to Council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Last week I was asked to do my first land acknowledgement since moving to the Bow Valley in January, and it made me realize that I have not done the work that I should be doing to fully understand the traditional territory that we live in. And so I am taking that as a commitment to do better. But I do want to acknowledge that I, like many of you I'm sure, am on a journey to better understanding my history, the history of the system I operate in, and the history of and traditional ways of the Indigenous people, and how these histories have been intertwined over the years, more specifically, the harm that has been caused so that I can live and play in such a beautiful community. I try to take time to reflect on this in my personal life and my role here with the town, and I think this is even more important this month as we move towards Truth and Reconciliation Day, especially in the wake of the passing of the Queen, who for many has been a symbol of colonization and pain. And that we try to both acknowledge and celebrate her life while also holding space for the Indigenous peoples and those voices that may have been silenced through this mourning period. I also want to share that in a talking circle that I participated in last week, there was a lot of discussion around the use of the word reconciliation to describe this journey that we are on. As the term reconciliation implies that we can make up for past behaviors, despite how horrific and intentional they were, and how those actions still exist today and cause pain to those communities and lead to systemic racism. For many, they feel that we may not be able to reconcile, but instead we need to work towards reciprocity. In those discussions last week, it was felt that the term conciliation may be a better term, which is the process of ending a disagreement and moving to a state of agreement. So that's just a thought I want to leave you with today as we move towards recognizing Truth and Reconciliation Day on September 30th. And so with that, I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta, And this is the traditional territory of the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bear Paws First Nation, Chiniki First Nation, and the Goodstoney First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy. And we also acknowledge that this territory is the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. And I hope that our actions here today honor the heritage of this land and that we make efforts to protect this land for 7 generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate you taking the time to be here today and sharing your perspective. I think it gives a richness to the town's process of land acknowledgement, the more voices we have. So I really, really appreciate it. And speaking of Truth and Reconciliation Day, we are, of course, looking forward to on Friday at noon, celebrating a momentous occasion in which representatives from the Stonies, the Tsuut'ina, and the Blackfoot Confederacy will be leading us in ceremony as we not only raise the Treaty 7 flag, but permanently install the Treaty 7 flag as part of the Civic Center's flags out front. And so I'm looking forward to that. And so we'll be keeping your words in our minds as we go through that as well. So everybody's welcome. I'll now move, or actually I'll look to the agenda. Are there any errors or omissions or items? Dr. Cottle? No?
Thank you, Mayor Krausert and Ms. Smithers. We need to move item D4 up to D2 just for a scheduling issue to accommodate the RCMP schedule. So okay. No change, just flipping the timing.
Okay, so right after D1, we'll move into D4?
Correct.
Okay, great. So that change is noted.
That's it.
With that, I move approval of the agenda for September 27th, 2022, Committee of the Whole as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, I'm excited that we have a number of delegations here today. And so for all of our delegations, just our normal process is that you get 10 minutes exclusive of questions. So we want to hear from you for 10 minutes, and then if we have any questions, we'll go from there. Our first delegation is the Canmore Public Library. Okay. Okay, need more light. Can we have the lights on above us, please? Whoever's closest to the switch there. Yeah, oh, there we go. There we go. Well done. There we go. Okay, better? Better? Okay, great. Great. Thank you. Welcome to Council.
Thank you so much. Mayor Crozert, members of Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. To give you some brief highlights about our library's accomplishments and highlights from the past year. I'd also like to introduce the Library Board Chair, Glynis Carling, who's right behind me here. Our library is a vibrant municipal service. It's well used by the community and sought out as a valuable partner by other community organizations. And thanks to the ongoing support of Council, the administration, Friends of the Library, the Marigold Library System, the library has been serving this community for over 50 years. Last year, as we experienced many ups and downs, restrictions being applied and lifted, and repeated openings and closures due to the pandemic, we had a significant milestone to celebrate, the library's 50th anniversary. As noted in the year in review summary in your package, throughout our anniversary year, we ran a number of special activities, held contests, and shared our story with the community. We offered limited edition book bags and 50th anniversary mugs as commemorative keepsakes, and we got members of the community to contribute items to our time capsule that can be opened up on the library's 100th birthday. In June, we worked closely with the Banff Canmore Community Foundation and the Friends of the Library to conduct a tribute campaign in memory of Helmy Bracco, a well-known community resident, who was extremely involved in the library and served on the library board in the 1990s. Thanks to community support, the Canmore Library Endowment Fund managed to reach the principal balance of $100,000. And over time, this endowment will help ensure the library can offer its programs and services in difficult economic times and be able to expand programs and services when a community need is identified. Throughout 2021, as we highlighted the library's history and our origin story, we did so through community presentations, our newsletter, and various social media platforms. And a particular date of note was August 10th, 1971. That was when Town Bylaw 96 was passed and provided for the establishment of a municipal library in Canmore. After Bylaw 96 was passed, the library opened in its first location in the basement of the Catholic Church that December. With a collection of 500 books and 2 donated shelves, it was open 7 hours a week and run completely by volunteers. 50 years and several moves later, the library operates within Elevation Place. It's a custom-built space over 11,000 square feet. We now have a collection in-house of over 69,000 items. And when fully operational, we're open 64 hours a week, and we have a staff of 20 regular employees and 2 seasonal staff. August, being our birthday month, was particularly special for us. The Friends of the Library received a community relief grant from the town that was used to purchase 50 titles on health and sustainability for the collection. During our birthday week, the library was filled with various decorations. We showcased a community jigsaw puzzle at the entryway, distributed special 50th anniversary cookies, and highlighted new books in our collection in our new in-house displays. We prepared a month-long exhibit at the Canmore Museum that also highlighted the library's history. An important part of our history was the Marigold Library System. We officially became a member on March 5th, 1987, and the Marigold system expanded our available resources well beyond our standalone budget and still does so today. In the 80s and 90s, this included important services like a union catalog, interlibrary loans, reference assistance, and paperbacks by mail service. Over the years, Marigold services have expanded to include high-speed internet access and Wi-Fi, various online resources, training programs, advocacy and marketing resources, and a library courier for interlibrary loan deliveries. As a member of the system, we now have access to the holdings of more than 180 libraries across the province. Our 2021 Return on Investment report, which was included in your package, illustrates the financial value of the services that Marigold provides. Our library's initiatives regularly receive system-wide recognition, and we've been recipients of the Marigold Making a Difference Award on multiple occasions. This includes in 2016 for our iRate program, a literacy initiative for Indigenous students, in 2019 for our outreach services to our seniors community, in 2021 for our community convoy during the pandemic, and this year we received honorable recognition for our 50th anniversary celebrations. Books are just the tip of the iceberg at our library. They are certainly a mainstay and traditional part of what we offer, but there's so much more that we provide in terms of our collection and our programs. In our collection, we offer a wide range of non-traditional resources that we like to call our library of things. We have a variety of puzzles, toys, games, and kits for children and adults, and we're constantly adding new items. Many of the games and puzzles are enjoyed in the library, but with a library membership, any of these items can be borrowed just like a regular book. In addition to the puzzles and games, other items in our library of things include physical literacy kits. We created these in partnership with the town of Canmore. There are a variety of different activities and ideas to practice physical skills and movement. Some of these kits include bocce ball, pickleball, soccer, and croquet. We have sensory kits that are intended for children with developmental challenges. The 2 kits that we have are filled with a variety of items to try out. Included in that are weighted blankets, a wiggle cushion, earmuffs, and assorted fidget toys. We have a Discover Nature Explorer backpack that's designed for families to learn about the Kananaskis region and includes binoculars, a first aid kit, and brochures and maps in multiple languages. And we also have walking poles. 8 sets are available for loan, and we've had a lot of people come in just to try them out before they purchase their own set. New on the programming side this year, we introduced our full moon swaps. Every month on or around the full moon, we hold a community swap, each one with a theme connected to the name of the full moon for that month. We encourage community members to bring gently used items they no longer need or want to the library the day of the swap. Items are displayed on tables and are available for anyone to take home. It's all free and everyone is welcome, and you don't need to bring a donation in order to participate. With our monthly swaps, the library has made a concerted effort to circulate items throughout our community, rather than discarding them, and we hope these swaps will encourage community connection and help keep usable items from piling up in the landfill. Anything that we have left over at the end is donated to a charity of our choice. Also new this year, we've offered programs such as a Stoney language class for children, teen pizza nights, an outdoor story time called the Teddy Bear's Picnic. In partnership with Canmore Pride, we offered a drag story time. We offer take-home craft and activity kits, and we reintroduced our adult skill craft sessions, which are standalone craft programs for adults. We also set up a little free library at the Canmore Rec Center. We call it the Bow Valley Book Exchange. You can borrow books without a library card. Located in the library of the Rec Center, this little bookshelf is filled with books for all ages and interests. Nonfiction and children's materials have been particularly popular. We maintain it regularly, and we've also had a number of members of the public stocking their own books on the shelf too, so there's always something new to discover. As the library is a municipal service, addressing community needs is key for us. To help guide us, we regularly update our plan of service every 3 to 5 years. It's based on community feedback and helps us identify gaps and opportunities for library services and programs. We're currently undertaking a community survey of library members and non-members, and we'll complete our new plan of service report in early 2023. And of course, we would value the feedback of council and administration as part of this process. To help our community stay current with library news and events, we actively promote programs, services, and initiatives via our monthly e-newsletter and our social media platforms. So if you haven't subscribed already, we certainly encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Preston. Really appreciate you coming and preparing a very thorough and detailed presentation. I'm looking to council to see if there are any questions. And Councillor Mara, you could just raise your hand if you'd like. Okay, Councillor Mara. Oh, We can't hear you just yet.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. I don't have a question per se. I just wanted to say thank you to our director, Michelle Preston, and our chair, Glynis Carling, for presenting today, and to the rest of the board and the staff, as they are a very enthusiastic group that I've been working with, and very out-of-the-box thinkers. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mara. Any questions from council? Seeing none, once again, thanks for being here today. Of course, the library is a very important part of any community, and we appreciate that we're hearing from the various groups that get funding from the town, so that as we go into our budget time, there's a familiarity amongst all of councillors. Some are more familiar than others. So thank you. Have a good day. We'll now move to, well, I just had a question for administration. I noticed the clocks. Okay, good.
Just for the record, she was under 10.
I know. I was eyeballing it. The next delegation is from the Canmore Museum. Mr. Ulrich, Mr. Nickerson, welcome to council.
Thank you very much. Does Ron get the extra time that she was under on this, or?
No.
Shame.
Sorry, it's non-transferable. Sorry.
It's a shame. Yeah, just as Ron's getting set up, Mayor and Council, sincere thanks for inviting us to present today. As Chair of the Board, it's my immense pleasure to introduce the presentation. Before doing so, I'd like to recognise a couple of fellow board members, Christine Morland and Rob Seeley, who've been able to join us today, as well as, of course, our town representative, Councillor Faubert. It feels like a very long time since we were last able to do an in-person presentation, and we're very proud of what the museum has achieved in the interim. It's a very different place now compared to when we last spoke. New team, new branding, and a new strategic plan that's well into its second year of operation. 2021 was a year of success and growth for the organisation. As with all cultural organisations around the world, we were dealt unexpected challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we feel that we rose to that challenge and we've come out stronger for the experience. And we've seen this reflected in the way the community has responded to our exciting new vision set forth in our Canmore Reimagined strategy. That strategy we launched back in April 2021. While charitable giving across Canada has decreased by 25% during the pandemic, we've seen donations to the museum increase by over 200% during this period. So we've seen that as a very, very positive response to where we've gone. On behalf of the museum, I want to offer sincere thanks to those generous community donors and a heartfelt thanks to the town of Canmore for its continued support, particularly during these last few years. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our Executive Officer, Ron Ulrich, who's going to walk you through the strategic plan highlights.
Thank you.
When we closed the doors of the museum in fall of 2020, we knew we had an unparalleled opportunity to rethink, reevaluate, and reimagine what the Canmore Museum was going to be like at the other end of the pandemic. And at the same time that was happening, a group of concerned citizens, about 1,600 of them, were actively engaged in a local development issue. And that whole episode in our community's life really informed what the Canmore Museum's new strategic direction would be. We saw a very active and engaged community. And we thought, how can we harness that in terms of the new museum and what the museum could do to be an active participant in the community's history. So we adopted what's called the social museum model, a museum model that's representative of, co-created by, and welcoming for all of the community. And we organized our work under 4 strategic pillars: building community, building place, building memory, and building sustainability. And we looked to 4 new ways that the community could be actively engaged and participating in that work with us. That is on-site programming, so our traditional model of what museums do, which is on-site exhibitions and programs and school programs. But we thought that the whole community and our mountain landscape was not only our museum, but also our classroom. We also have the museum at home. How do we make our museum accessible to both visitors and residents 24/7, 365 days a year? And also the museum at school. The notion that a partnership between schools, the museum, and the community could provide a rich learning experience for everyone. So how did that shake out in 2021 into this year? Well, first of all, one of the major projects that we looked at was rethinking our collections. How do our collections reflect our community? How do the community access our collection? And how does the collections reflect our community's story? So we've been actively engaged in a 5-year process. Last year was the first year. We're continuing that this year, in which we're separating our artifacts out into those objects that have a clear community story and those which can be part of our education collection and accessible to teachers and students alike. It's also about connecting to community. The social museum model is predicated on the whole notion of community partnerships and engagement. So how do we engage with our community through partnerships? And so we initiated a number of initiatives such as the Community Gallery, Community Day, being part of the founding of Canmore Pride. We hosted a number of events in partnership with a number of community organizations as well during that time period to start building relationships between like-minded organizations and the Canmore Museum. It was also about building bridges through learning opportunities with our Indigenous neighbors. So things like our TP program, the Indigenous Learning Circle, and some of the other work that we were laying the foundation for that we're starting to see this year taking place. And of course, in the pandemic, the pivot to digital. We didn't see this as just a short-term solution, but a long-term opportunity to engage not only our community, but those who actively come to our community as second home residents, visitors, and tourists. So this was a way for us to be able to build long-term relationships with people outside of the four walls of the museum. We were very grateful, as Andrew had mentioned, to the town's support for us. In a time when many museums were experiencing cutbacks and setbacks from the pandemic, from a number of different government levels, we were very fortunate to have your continued support at the same level that we had received previously. That, coupled with government subsidies, things like the wage subsidy and other federal cultural subsidies, as well as the donations from the community, really helped put us into a really solid financial position from the pandemic. So what's coming up? So those 4 projects really laid the foundation for the next few years. So first of all, one of the projects that we've got underway is Uncovering Canmore's Heritage. It's a project where at its basis is a heritage planning and conservation project. Back in 1982, over 320 buildings were identified as being of age 40 years or more. Today, only 60 of those buildings still remain. And so this project is discovering what are those buildings, what are the state that they're in, and be able to provide information that your town planning department can use in helping you making assessments in relationship to heritage properties and heritage spaces. Canmore's Mining Heritage Strategy is a community-based strategy to bring that origin story to today's audiences and making that relevant through 9 different projects, one of which is a $250,000 virtual exhibition, as well as some of the other physical aspects such as trail markers and such. One of the things that we are doing in our own space in order to be able to provide space for community voices and co-created exhibitions is taking out our core exhibit and replacing it with the community gallery. 1,100 square feet of space that we'll change over 3 times a year to allow for different stories to be told. Our core exhibit right now tells one narrative. In this exhibit space, we'll be able to tell multiple narratives from multiple perspectives. I'm also very proud of this initiative. Those two go hand in hand, the community gallery space and this. So one exhibition in that space is an art exhibition, one is a local history exhibition, and one is an Indigenous-based exhibition. And so this Indigenous Cultural Residency Program will allow us to take the recommendations that were released today as part of Truth and Reconciliation Week by the Canadian Museum Association, call number 67, and be able to start putting into practice those initiatives that will allow us to decolonize the museum. And that's part of the whole notion of this. This is a program that is being hosted in conjunction with Athabasca University and the Alberta Museums Association. Of course, we're furthering our digital work. We just received a $45,000 grant from the Department of Canadian Heritage to further this initiative in partnerships, like with Google Arts and Culture, being able to bring the story of Canmore to a global audience. I would be remiss if we didn't bring up the new facility. We've been before council on this previously. So we know that cultural work and cultural facilities take a long time to develop. And just this week, we sent into administration a letter asking for an extension on our lease, as well as the opportunity to participate as a partner in the downtown redevelopment plan, bringing both our heritage perspective and the voice of culture to the redevelopment process. Thank you. With 27 seconds left. Not bad, eh?
Thank you. Very much appreciate your presentation today, as well as would like to recognize the changes that we have seen over the last few years in particular, and how the conversation that the museum's involved in is not what one traditionally might think of as purely historical, but the conversation is about the present and about the future. And taking a multi-dimensional approach. It's not just a place you go visit, it's a place that is involved in the community.
It's an active place for dialogue.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that we saw through the whole dialogue in the community around the redevelopment of Three Sisters property was about bridging our understanding of the past with the present, with an eye to the future. And we saw that as a real opportunity for the museum in terms of inserting ourselves into the community dialogue process. So,
yeah, absolutely. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser. Thank you, Mr. Ulrich and Mr. Nickerson, for being here. As the council rep, I just wanted to take a moment to thank yourselves, the board, the staff of the museum, the volunteers, and the membership, and everyone who contributes through sponsorship and fundraising. And you think about that, it's a whole lot of different groups of people that are part of that success. So where you've taken the museum from to collectively has been a lot of hard work, and I think it's really valued in the community. I did want to ask a question, to at least give some, I like to ask questions, apparently. A lot of change has happened in terms of the museum, but in terms of changes, that much change isn't really sustainable, right? Like, you're not going to keep changing that much. What are some of the projects, programs, or events that have come out of this change that you see continuing into the future for the museum?
I think, good question. I think how we are reimagining our collections, in particular how we can make the collections accessible, that's an ongoing piece of our work. That's why municipalities fund us, that's why the federal government and the provincial government fund us. So the care and duty towards our collection is critical. The work around digital and ensuring that the museum can be accessible, that's going to continue to evolve and change over time as technology changes and as new opportunities arise. I've always been a proponent of the smart museum, the notion that you can walk in and, that engagement takes place on my phone, it takes place on my home computer, it takes place, and the museum recognizes me within that environment, all of those different environments in my interest. That to me is kind of an opportunity to continue some of that. I think the notion of relationship building is a continual process, or relationship building with the Stoney and other Indigenous people, I think is an ongoing process. But I think we've laid the foundation for a lot of the projects and in the new ways that the Canmore Museum is undertaking its work. So I think, as soon as we kind of see ourselves past this strategic plan, I think the changes will begin to level off into the maturity of these programs moving forward.
One follow-up, if I may. The museum held an event for the first time this year, the Heritage Festival? Is that right?
Yep.
Is that what it's, I'm on the board, I forget what it's called, but it was end of July. New events and a new focus, a new style. Is that going to continue in the future, and how did it go?
Yes, so we had over 1,100 people participate in that festival. And as a first year with a lot of other, I wouldn't say competing festivals, but certainly it's a very vibrant community. Staking a new festival, it takes a bit of time to establish that. I was really happy with that work, and I think that is a festival that we're keen to grow into the future. And there's a lot of opportunities that came out after that festival that people came forward with from all of our partners about how we can grow that and mature that festival into something that's really an opportunity for the community to connect with one another and our history.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation so far coming to council. I'm a big fan of the cow. You stated in your presentation that you're going to be switching up the space, that the traditional space, gallery what is the word I'm looking for?
Exhibit space?
Thank you, exhibit. That was the word I'm struggling with. That the exhibit's going to be changing 3 times a year. How do you think Old Canmore is going to be responding to the fact that the mining exhibit might be missing for part of the year for them?
So the mine story remains.
Oh, okay, all right.
So
That's in
the
my
space
mind
is
what
1,700 square feet in total.
Yes, of course.
So one of the challenges with the current space is that there's not a succinct story around coal mining that's told in that. So part of the coal mining heritage strategy is to make that space a little bit more succinct, using current technologies to tell more stories, and that is part of the core exhibit moving forward. So that's about 500 square feet of that space, and that will link to some of the other projects, things like our digital walking tour, things like the digital exhibition, the virtual reality. That in itself gives us umpteen amount of opportunities to be able to explore Canmore's mining heritage. Things like, right now, people love being able to go underground. But can you imagine being able to walk down Main Street, Canmore in 1920, or going into the Tipple, or any of the mine buildings? And that's some of the technologies that we're currently working on.
Oh, that's
so so there's opportunities to expand that story with technology.
Right on. Well, I had the opportunity to be in the gift shop during the Pride flag, and I wanted to say how I've always loved the museum gift shop. It's actually a place where I find things to send souvenirs to family and friends across the country. When I first moved out west, I was a big fan of the White Museum gift shop. I still am a fan of that gift shop. So I know that sounds kind of a strange thing, but the ability to be able to find Canmore-focused or Rocky Mountain-focused souvenirs, or it's not just all sunshine stuff like it was a decade ago, right? It would just see sunshine bumper stickers at the Rusticana, and that was about as good as it got when it came to souvenirs. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that and how I love that you're featuring local artists. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Ma.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Nickerson and Mr. Ulrich. You talk about moving forward over the next couple of years. Hopefully sooner than that, we'll be working on a downtown redevelopment plan. What sort of vision do you guys hope to bring forward as we come to that?
Well, I think, downtowns can be a multitude of different types of spaces, right? And so the notion of public space making, I think, is really important opportunity that we have with the downtown core. I think things like closing the main street and some of the reaction that we've had to that, I think demonstrate that people are really keen to see the downtown be an active, vibrant, economically viable, and culturally rich space to be able to insert themselves into. This is where we can find Canmore. I think is an important opportunity that the downtown core provides. And I think the notion of around redeveloping this corridor, the 9th Avenue corridor in particular, I think there's opportunities to explore some different types of partnerships that could really enrich the downtown core. I mean, I know about the need for an event plaza. That's what we see with active use in front of the Civic Center. We've also got that lovely parking lot that can be bridged, and other opportunities along 9th Avenue that I think with the right conversation can really anchor the downtown core in terms of it being a culturally vibrant space. Okay. So I'm hopeful through that conversation that we can look at ways that we can bring arts, culture, and heritage to the downtown core. One of the things I think from our perspective, and this is the evolution of communities. I'm not one of these people that says, we've got to restore the town back to 1920 appearance. Communities evolve and change. But ensuring that that community story of our downtown somehow is anchored in that work. The notion that this wasn't just an economic street, but it was also a residential street. And we only have 3 of these homes that were originally part of that left on Main Street. So how do we tell that story? And that's one of the reasons that we want to be involved in that process, to ensure that that community story, our origins, and the ability for when visitors come here to be able to see this as an authentic community and not a community that's only 10, 20 years old based on the development that they're seeing, but they see it as a layered story over time.
Okay. Awesome. I also wanted to say the teepee raising event that you guys had earlier this year, which I attended with my daughters, they really liked it, and that was just such a great experience. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. We'll now move to the 3rd delegation, the Bow Valley Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Thank you. Welcome to council.
Thank you. I think Ben was
Oh, you can bend it.
a little
Yeah.
taller than me, I think. Okay.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep.
So thank you so much I'll watch the clock, for the opportunity. There's some new faces on council, so I'll super quick go over kind of who we are and where we are, because we still get that question. And then I'll talk about what we've been up to since the last time we were before council, which was in 2020. The Bow Valley SPCA, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, we are a nonprofit humane society that was established in 2000 to support the people and animals of the Bow Valley. Our mission is twofold. First, it's to operate an adoption center in the community that's based on a no-cage, no-kill philosophy, which was unique in Canada at the time, and glad to say more shelters have come on board with that philosophy. And that's really to care for and rehome abandoned cats and dogs. And we are just cats and dogs, no rabbits. The second part of our mission is to promote humane attitudes and work on education for responsible pet ownership and companionship in the community. And that's through education and leadership. So the Adoption Center. The Carla Cumming Sajonki Adoption Center was opened 15 years ago. So we've been celebrating our 15th anniversary this summer. Lots of anniversaries like the library. So over 15 years, we're pretty excited. We have rescued over 665 dogs and 1,475 cats. And we think that's pretty incredible given sort of the way we operate on the no cage basis. So all of our animals are housed in rooms. There's no cages or kennels, which is great for the animals. It's less stressful. We do, as a no-kill shelter, sometimes have animals that stay with us for lengthy periods of time. We do have cats and dogs who will stay for a year with us. So it's important that they're in a good space, but it does limit our capacity. So compared to other shelters, we are quite small. So we have 6 dog rooms and a playroom that can be a dog room. It's usually our puppy room, as well as 6 cat rooms. Cats don't get the luxury of individual rooms unless they're very special, which sometimes happens. So our manager's office has been a cat room. Our boardroom has been a cat room when they don't play well with others. So what that's meant for us kind of on an annual basis, so like others that I've heard here today, the pandemic sort of changed things. And for us, the rescue adoption was a craze during the pandemic. So 2020 was a big year. It was probably a 20% increase for us on total adoption numbers. 2021 was crazy. So 2021 was certainly a high watermark for us in number of adoptions. We had 61 dogs adopted and 169 cats. The turnover was pretty quick, which is very unusual for us. Obviously, we're thrilled to be able to rescue that many dogs, but to be honest, that was a bit of a tax on our facility and our people. And so if you compare like a 2019 number, we would be 150 total adoptions. So what we're seeing, of course, now in the first 6 months, like most other shelters, is a return to normal. So the sort of interest has waned a little bit and we're back to normal numbers. So our dogs so far in the first 6 months are 17 dog adoptions, which is typical, and 81 cats. So we're sort of predicting that we'll be closer to kind of that 150 total adoption number this year. What we're seeing on surrenders, unfortunately, is the inverse. So 2021, we had a typical number of 23 surrendered cats and dogs. So that's people coming to the shelter and then leaving us their animal. 2022, we've already seen that in the first 6 months. So we're not unique in that. That's just what's happening at shelters, certainly around the area, but I think I could probably say in Canada and the United States. That's unfortunately the trend that we're seeing post-pandemic. One of the other things we do at the shelter is we work with Canmore Municipal Enforcement. So we don't talk about this much. I don't, but we're happy to talk about it today, and certainly with this audience. So by agreement with the town, we do temporarily house dogs and cats that are picked up by enforcement officers until they can be retrieved by their owners. And I should just say that the retrieving is through enforcement, not directly from us. So 2021, our numbers were around 13 dogs and cats, 9 of which were returned to their owners. So far, January to August, we're 11 dogs and cats. A large majority of those 9 have been returned to their owners. So what happens after 72 hours under the bylaw, the animals are surrendered to the Bow Valley SPCA, and we will take them into our care and rehome them. So that's sort of the official relationship, but we are hoping that we can sort of build on that. And last year we were able to do a day at Quarry Lake with WildSmart and municipal enforcement and sort of have an education program going, and hopefully we can do more things like that in the future. So we're looking forward to working together with Greg and Caitlin and sort of building on that and just seeing what else we can do given sort of the overlap in kind of our objectives and missions. And I should say all animals are available for adoption. In this presentation. So outside outside sort of the adoption center activities, what we do is we do try and connect with the community. So deliver on the second part of our mission. And obviously during the pandemic, that was tough. We're a touch and feel group of people. So we did, as most people try and transition to virtual, so we were able to still connect with the schools virtually. And we're really hoping that 2022-23 school year, we're able to get back into the classrooms just sort of a better way to connect with the kids. And we work with the sort of schools on trying to get age-appropriate, like things that fit with the curriculum as to what our topics would be. And we do have some litters of kittens, so we're hoping that maybe that'll be the incentive. Incentive a teacher needs to get us in the classroom. One of the things we were able to do as things sort of get a bit back to normal is start hosting groups back at the center. So one of the groups that we were hosted that we really enjoyed was the Girls Connect group. And so that's one of the programs with Family Community Support Services. And so just talking with Lisa Brown, we're hoping that between her and her colleagues, we can sort of come up with other ways to engage with FCSS and other programs and people that we might have something, to deliver. That's a value or interest. So hopefully that's something we can grow next year. We were able to restart visits to seniors at Origins, so that's something we love to do. And that's really just about love, actually. That's just a touch and feel visit. So our volunteers go with sort of pre-approved or screened dogs, and that's really more just a therapeutic engagement with the animals. And so that's another place that we've recruited more volunteers, and we're hoping to sort of just be able to get a bit more out in the community. And I think there's just a need for sort of that connection with animals by a number of groups in the community. We do also do hands-on training at the center. So we try and provide low-cost classes to the community. So we do puppy socialization. This summer we did agility classes. We got some new agility equipment, and so that's been really fun to watch. And we continue to do force-free training education with all our volunteers. One of the other community offerings we have is a program we call SNAP. So that's the Spay and Neuter Assistance Program. And that's a program we have in conjunction with the 2 local veterinary clinics. And we offer low-cost spay and neuter for pets to families that meet the eligibility criteria. So we do follow the town of Canmore's affordable services requirements to determine eligibility and make those low-cost surgeries available to people. So 2021, typical number, 15 owners access the program. This year we're sort of tracking similarly with 8 to the end of August. And I think what we would like to do is also see if we can build awareness of this. I don't think many people in the community know it's out there. And certainly given the economic challenges so many people are facing, it just seems like something we'd like to make sure is out there. And I know the veterinary clinics would support us in doing that. So really that's sort of all I could cover in 10 minutes without talking faster. But I'm happy to take questions. And I think the focus for us coming up is just building on what we're doing out in the community. I mean, our adoption center functions very well, and we're happy to bring more people in and also just try and find different ways to connect with other partners in town and other, parts of the town, administration or otherwise, and just be out there and share our message and just deliver back to the community, because we are so grateful for what the community provides to us. We could not do what we do without not only the financial support, but actually the just volunteer hours that go into the Bow Valley SPCA. So grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation today and for the work that the SPCA does, and for providing all those cute pictures of cats and dogs. And there was more than one that I thought I'd like to adopt, but I didn't have room. At least my dog would have something to say about it. So thank you very much for that. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Graham.
We lost our dog earlier this summer.
I'm sorry.
And now you made me miss her a lot today. I wanted to say thank you for the work you guys do. It is fantastic. And I wasn't aware of the program you had for the Canmore Affordability Program with the spay and neuter. And I wonder if that program translates over to adoption fees.
That's an interesting, so we haven't established that. That's certainly something we could consider implementing. We are fairly understanding of people's circumstances with adoptions, and do try and be a bit flexible in adjusting fees where necessary, but that's certainly something we could consider more formalizing for sure.
Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was just looking here on your sheet here, and already between January to June, about half the year, there's already been like more surrenders than the year prior. I know people surrender like animals for all sorts of reasons. I'm just curious, would you have a rough idea what proportion of that is because people have a change in their housing situation?
We don't, and we have talked this, so Megan Keelan, our adoption center manager,
Megan.
is here, and we have sort of talked about this. I don't know that we sort of have an exact number. I think in prior years it certainly has been with people either moving into the senior care that doesn't allow pets, or moving away from the valley, going back overseas, and sometimes going into staff accommodation, but I don't know that we have a...
Yeah, we've had some issues with staff accommodation.
Thanks, Megan.
We have had a few incidents where it's staff accom, so they weren't living in staff accom before, then moved to staff accom, and they had pet-friendly housing, and then staff accom isn't pet-friendly, and so it's kind of a juggle between, do I keep a job or keep my pet? And then there's I would say it's not the primary reason in town, but there's the odd one where it is moving and it's not pet-friendly, and it's more like there's no other options for them there's nowhere else to move, so it's like, do I have housing or have a pet?
Yeah,
So,
I've heard that situation anecdotally from friends where they're just like, if anything happens to us and we can't stay here, I don't know where we're going to go because
it's
we don't want to
scary.
give up our pet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a correlation between the high uptick of adoptions during COVID and then maybe some people found that they jumped too quickly into pet ownership.
I think we're getting the overflow from the larger shelters. So I think, because Calgary and Cochrane have mentioned that they do have a lot of returns from people who maybe jumped the gun in COVID. And because those shelters are so over capacity and have waiting lists of about 6 months that aren't moving, so we start to get kind of a trickle over effect, and also we're over capacity, so people trying to surrender here also reach out to those shelters and are told of the backlog. So we seem to be the better choice because we're like a few months rather than 6 months to a year.
Councillor McCallum.
So courtesy of Miss Keelan over here, I am a new dog mom. And I've wanted to be a dog mom for 48 years, and in my 48th year, I became a dog mom. But what I wanted to say was, like during COVID, what I really noticed with the SPCA's messaging is how much digital you were engaging in, and what a great job you guys were doing. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up that how great your digital marketing awareness maybe is a better word. I know you do it personally. I know you do it through the SPCA's actual own media channels, but I just wanted to comment on what a great job that you guys did, because I knew you guys were drowning, as most shelters were, and not just drowning like, and now it's a reverse drowning because they're coming back, but just the amount of people and trying to make good decisions and make sure that animals are going into good homes and not just somebody that's looking for something for the now. So anyways, that's all I wanted to comment, and thank you for the work you do. And thank you for making me a dog mom. I adopted myself as a slightly cranky middle-aged woman. Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time today and being with us here. We'll now turn to the minutes for Tuesday, June 21st, so long ago. Here we are in the fall, and that was the first day of summer. Are there any errors or omissions found in the minutes? Seeing none, I'll then move approval of the minutes of June 21st, 2022, Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And we'll move to item D1, Adventure Club Summer Pilot Project Evaluation. Now let's see if I remember correctly. Ms. de Montigny.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah? All right. Is it correct?
De Montigny.
De Montigny. Okay.
She's like, it's not really.
Okay.
It really isn't my last name, but I should.
Okay.
I'm just too late.
Ms. de Montigny, welcome back to council.
It's an easy one to get wrong.
Good afternoon, Mayor Crosert and members of council. I am here to present to you on the Adventure Club pilot project evaluation through the Family Connection Centre. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what I'm going to talk to you about today, just the Family Connection Centre information, as well as the grant funding surplus, the Adventure Club details about the program that we ran, as well as the stats and the outcomes and related data, as well as future considerations for the program. So just to give you a really brief overview and just a reminder of what the Family Connection Centre is, it's made up of the Family Resource Network and the Social Connections programs. The Family Resource Network provides parents and caregivers with education, information, and support, as well as offers child and youth development programs. And it is grant funded through the Alberta government. The Social Connections program is a child development-based program which connects children, youth, and families in our community. And this one is municipally funded. So we had just over $7,000 surplus from the Family Resource Network 2021-2022 budget. Because this was the provincial FRN, or Family Resource Network budget, we needed to spend this on child and youth program, or child and youth development services. So after analyzing the gaps and the needs in the community, the Family Connection Centre launched the Adventure Club program. And the Adventure Club program was in operation between July 11th and August 23rd, which was a 7-week time span. And it was based out of 2 parks. So we were out of Lions Park and Centennial Park. And this program was a short-term child development-based pilot program. We offered 4 sessions per week for the 6 to 9 year age group, as well as 1 session for the 10 to 13 year age group. So we're just going to take a quick look at the stats for the program. So we had 200 registered for the program and 142 attend the program. So there could be multiple reasons or factors why this could be. If we were to run this program and it would be in operation in 2023, we may consider adding a charge for this program to see if this increases attendance. There was a total of 63 unique children that attended the Adventure Club program this summer. There were 3 program outcomes for the Adventure Club for families to have an affordable childcare alternative to promote that social emotional development for children and youth, and as well as for families to feel supported and connected to the community. To measure this, we provided families with a post-program survey. 23 families filled out this survey. So in the next 3 slides, I'll walk you through the results of the survey. So we asked parents why they registered for the Adventure Club program. Parents were able to choose more than one answer. So the top 4 reasons for registering was for something for their child to do, which was at 70%, socializing and meeting other children, which was just over 50%, to give parents a break was at 30%, and that community connection piece was at just over 40%. So parents either verbally commented or gave us additional information on the survey that they needed that short break to be able to focus on work, to take a break for themselves, and many were just looking for something for their child to do or to be engaged in for a few hours during the day. At drop-off, I spoke to one mom at length, and this was just one mom, but she did say that there was multiple other families that were feeling the same way. And she said that they are making it work, trading off childcare and getting support from neighbors, but it had been tough prior to this program running. She said other community options, which were full daycare for her children, didn't make sense financially or suit their family's needs. She said the program had been very helpful. To drop her child off for 2 hours, they'd had child development-based programming, they were learning games, meeting new people, and she knew that they were supervised, which doesn't always happen when they were juggling their work schedules. We also asked the question if the program helped with affordability in Canmore, and 83% of respondents strongly agreed with this. For this question, we were looking to understand if the Adventure Club had supported social emotional learning for families and to also understand if children learned more about the community. Over 90% of respondents reported that their child gained skills in all of these areas. So emotional development and growth, teamwork, social skills, building friendships, developing and gaining new skills, and learning about the community. To measure our final outcome, we asked parents if they felt more connected to the community as a result of the Adventure Club program. 87% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed this was a result for their family. So before looking at future considerations, I'd like to recognize the Family Connection Center staff that got this program up and running in a short period of time. The facilitators worked during a very hot summer, which was very nice, and also contended with many bugs, but they still put on an engaging and invaluable program for the children and youth in this community. They received countless positive comments, too many for me to share today, from families about the quality of the program, the energy and enthusiasm of staff, and the children were excited to come back and attend the program again, and sometimes again. I also want to give a shout out to the support staff and the behind the frontline staff delivering the program. So putting on a program this size actually involves quite a bit of time and organization and support with registration and execution. So we did receive many written and verbal comments from parents. Here are a few that I pulled out as they were mentioned several times. Parents really wanted to see more sessions offered and additional days of the week for them to be offered. Parents commented that they would like to see the program be longer in duration, so longer than the 2 hours, and they would like to see the program offered consistently on school breaks and throughout the year. Ideally, this program would be offered for multiple age groups at the same time, so a parent could drop off all of their children just in different programs at the same time, and include a program for children ages 3 to 5. So the Family Connection Center recommends that the Adventure Club be incorporated into the annual operational plan, and the 2023 proposed Family Connection Center budget will include the option for Council's consideration. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. I'll just leave that there.
Thank you, Ms. de Montigny. Looking to Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Monty. You guys pulled off an amazing program for a short period of time for a $7,000 budget is very impressive, so well done. Once a year, I offer a free day of sessions at my place of business. And it fills up in about 25 minutes. I think I've got about 20 slots in a day that can fill up, but I give it away for free. I've done it for 3 years in a row now. However, of those people that sign up, only about 50% actually show up. And this year I'm seriously considering a very nominal $5, $10 fee. And there's just something about that little bit of skin in the game that really helps with attendance. And so I just want to say congratulations on a well-run program on a limited time and budget, and this year my program won't be entirely free.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you for your presentation. You already know I'm a big fan of this. And I was going to say something similar. There's some way, it's too bad that so many people chose to not be able to attend because it took a spot from somebody that could attend. And I find it is sort of this weird habit, like even when you're giving something away free, say on Facebook Marketplace or something like that, people just don't place any value on it, and they don't place any value on your time. So I would say maybe considering a no-show fee or something like that. Take a credit card or whatever. And you know, there's always sometimes like good reasons, something's happened, there's an emergency, whatever, but that's almost 25% of the slots available. I think it's interesting that so many people are so interested. And I think it really speaks to the time that our workforce has been through in the last couple of years, and how looking for breaks in any way they can find it for their mental health and that of their children as well. So I think for you, the work that you guys do in your department, as you know, I'm a fan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll look forward to the recommendations that we're to consider at budget time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will now move to skip down to item D4, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Q1 and Q2 stats. Staff Sergeant Singleton, welcome to council.
Thank you very much. I do have Jack Roble with me as well. So I did bring Q1 stats for us in the quarterly report because Q2 stats actually don't end until the end of the month. So it is Q1, so we're a little bit dated. So that time range goes from April to June. I am able to kind of give you an update on some of the other pressing issues and concerns we have. So as you're aware, the RCMP does quarterly reports. So quarterly one, again, goes from April to June, and then at the end of this month, on Friday, we would be transitioning over to quarter two. It takes us about a month just to collect those reports. It's something I'll start drafting here in about another week or two.
Yeah, my apologies. I think it was just because all of the others were Q1 and Q2, it carried through, but Q1 it is.
Okay, perfect. So how our quarterly reports work, we kind of do a snapshot. So it's all, a lot of this is based off our annual performance plan. So when we meet in March or throughout the year really, when we look at what our priorities are. So one of the big things we do is our community engagement. And that can include working with homeowner associations, trying to run town halls. Every time I meet with municipal staff, political officials, we kind of document. So obviously we can't document everything, but it's a way of tracking what we're doing and to motivate us to make changes, to listen and to adapt. So that adaptiveness piece is one of the big, really moving parts that we're currently dealing with. When we talk about the provincial police review, we've heard loud and clear that we need to be more engaged, and when we say engaged, we have to be consultative. So that's one of the pieces we do. So when we look at the community report, again, we talk about stakeholders. I have to be cognizant of privacy concerns and what our conversations are, so I just try to really do a quick snapshot of what those pieces are. A big piece for us here in town is automated traffic enforcement, so that's where we meet with the town and we meet with the contractor and we discuss zones and policy changes and those kind of pieces. Meeting with elected officials, so you'll see that we have March in there, so that's when we really started having those conversations. But this is high level, so I'll just skim through a lot of that. Some of the things I'm really proud of that we've been able to maintain is obviously our Indigenous relationships with our communities and surrounding communities. So I am still very actively engaged. I was invited to go out during this last powwow. So I went out and I worked the powwow out there. You know what, it's really beneficial to have these community connections and to be part of that. I very much enjoy it. So we're still being invited out there. Obviously, again, one of the big things is emergency management. So our RCMP involvement with the Georgetown wildfire was a fabulous exercise for us to really go over what our roles would be, how we can provide assistance, what works, what doesn't work. Anytime the RCMP are involved, communication's always an issue, so we knew that leading up to it. We worked through some of those challenges, and guess what? Communication was a part of it again, right? So it's really good to work through that. Again, our National Indigenous Day that the town hosted and our Red Surge duties on that. Thank you guys for inviting us out to that ceremony, and very good. One of the other things that we did, we were able to meet with the Downtown and Business Improvement Association, and we heard about some crime prevention issues, so we were able to bring in for free a consultant, and we actually did a risk analysis on a local business, and we identified a number of issues, concerns, and we worked with them, and that was all free to the business. So I think that was a really good win. I think they took away some stuff, plus it also gives us, we're being part of the community, trying to help with some of the problems that we're seeing downtown. Stakeholders, the multi-year financial plan, that's a big piece, and we've learned from previous years to be more actively engaged with our communities, and more so even with council to work through some of these pieces. Policing is a big cost to the community, so anytime we can start planning and talking about what our vision is, because it's my vision, it's the RCMP's vision, it may not be the community's vision, so we try to work on that to have a cohesive plan moving forward, because we're talking about a 5-year plan. So traffic, speeding, Three Sisters Homeowners Association, we've been working with them a lot, and that helps us when we go into our automated traffic enforcement when we're setting zones. So like those areas, speeding, it's pedestrians, it's crosswalk safety, and that evolves into when we talk about our bike rodeos. So that was a big piece. So I'm glad to say we've had 4 bike rodeos. We had 1 community bike rodeo. It wasn't very well attended. And sometimes I think it's difficult for us as the RCMP to manage this, or municipal enforcement, because it's so dependent on resources and priority calls. So we are going to be working with, it's something I want to continue to evolve and move forward with. So we have some really good support from some businesses. So we're going to see if maybe we can offload some of that responsibility or some of that planning to make it more of a cohesive biking group, and then they can draw more people into it. So we've had some really good success with that bike rodeo, as well as our positive ticketing initiative. So I know I may have seen the mayor. So the draw for that is October the 5th. And just so everyone to know, that was completely unplanned. So
it was legitimate.
That's what you said. It was a legitimate.
Totally was.
For real. I'm a police, I can't lie.
That's right.
Right? So we had really good support, so that's a program we're continuing to build through the year, so I'm really glad to say that we kicked that off during our Q1, and that ends October 5th is when we're gonna stop doing that. We still have stuff, so, and the pandemic has been very challenging for the RCMP. You're gonna see when we talk about our members, so Canmore is unique. We have 19 municipally funded positions. Of that, we have 4 provincially funded positions, which brings us to 23 regular members. And then we have 5 support staff. Out of that 23 members, I'm currently down 8. So it's a huge number. So when we're talking about community engagement being visible, it's very challenging. It's very challenging to do other things like community enforcement for Traffic Safety Act. So that's where we are relying upon some of our other units, our enhanced budgets, so our traffic unit, integrated traffic unit, and photo radar, our automated traffic enforcement is helping with that. Because again, when we're down, we used to have 5 members on the road. When you have 2, 3 members on the road, last night, there's a period we had 2 members on the road. Right, so that's very challenging if we have a high-profile incident or having to support other units. So we had a high-profile incident happen in another community that we had to provide support to, and then we're potentially looking at not having any members in the community for a period of time. So that is something that I work with, that Jack continues to work with, and try to find innovative ways to deal with our resources. And I'm hoping in the next 2 to 3 months, we're gonna get some of these members back. But when we talk about statistics too, so some of the, obviously the property crime, so we've had during Q2, we've had some really good successes with targeted enforcement. So we work with our neighboring communities, with our neighboring police agencies. We have intelligence meeting. During this quarter as well, we did, or sorry, it was the previous quarter, we did a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce where we went over what our crime trends are. So during that time, it was a lot of online scams, like credit card scams or ATM scams, where people would go to a point-of-sale terminal and they would play with the terminal and commit a fraud, right? Punch in different numbers, not present a credit card, and then just put numbers in. Criminals are fairly smart. They're very innovative. They make a lot of money doing this. So we did this presentation, and it just happened that there was business in town. The employee said, "This is what I just did," and the boss, the owner of the company, said, "Hey, I just remember we had a presentation on this." They phoned us, happened to phone a member that was working that they were friends with, so they had very quick access to the police. They had a surveillance photo we set up downtown, right over here, and we located the person in a stolen vehicle and got tons of stolen property back. And a good news story is that we were able to return items to stores that didn't even know items were stolen yet. So, and that is strictly because of our intelligence-led policing, because we knew who these people were, because we had shared intelligence, we were able to quickly set up, plus some of our proactive policing and crime prevention techniques that we've done. So we don't always win. That was really good. And then my sergeant here came out of another unit that had some really good ideas. So how did they get to Canmore? They came to Canmore in a vehicle. Well, how do they pay for that vehicle? They don't have a normal income, right? So guess what that is? It's offense-related property. We seized the vehicle. We haven't had that group in town for a couple weeks now, right? So we have to change and adapt and hire really smart people to help us out as well. So that was a really good news story for us. And then some of the things that we're really seeing that aren't good news stories is our mental health calls for service. I know we may have an opportunity to bring in the RPAC unit, so that's our regional crisis team. So we may be having an opportunity to have them come and present to you on what they do. But for example, we just ran the stats from January 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2022. Our sudden deaths, 11. So that is a member going to a suicide, right? So with everything else happening in the community, those are very tough and challenging calls because they're not great calls to go to, and we're dealing with some pretty unique situations as well. And then our mental health calls during that time, we've had 87 mental health calls. So there's a lot of people that are in crisis. When the police get called, it's a crisis, right? And that's where these regional crisis teams are so important because they have quick track to information online. They can tell us the last time they may have been in the hospital, if there's underlying medical conditions. So when we're doing our risk assessment, gone are the days, hopefully gone are the days the Mounties are kicking in a door and charging in, right? It's a lot more verbal conversation and communication, risk assessment, and trying to work with the patient to get them the best result. The gold standard is get them in front of a healthcare provider for a proper assessment. And sometimes, again, the stats I believe are around 80%. So if an RCMP officer goes and deals with a person in mental health, they do the assessment, we take them to the hospital, versus if there's a regional crisis team member who has specialized training, knows the language, the communication skills, they can write up their assessment. When they take them to the hospital, it's about 80% admissions rate. We're 20, 30%, right? So doesn't always work. We don't always have them in, but it's an extra tool to have. So, and then our municipal bylaw enforcement calls have skyrocketed. I think we're all aware of that. We've been talking about resources issues within our unit, within municipal enforcement. So we were looking at, we've had 234 calls for municipal bylaws. So, yeah, well, hopefully that's a quick overview. If you have any questions, concerns.
Yeah, thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. I had a question with regards to, scrolling down to it here, the stats table of crime statistics, April to June, and I see a marked decrease year over year for that time period in traffic offenses. Is that partly due or maybe largely due to staffing issues? Less officers out on the road looking at those things?
So this is not a great conversation piece to have with council. But so there are a number of things have happened, as you're aware. So this year, RCMP officers knew, so I guess going back, they knew that our contract, so our collective bargaining agreement, so we're in the dark as much as many other people on what was going to happen with our collective agreement. So what ended up happening, members got backdated paychecks. So members have made a lot of money this year due to backdated paychecks and pay raises being paid out. We got taxed extremely heavily on those parts. So a lot of members are saying right now there is zero benefit in them working overtime to backfill because of the tax situation. And then our members that are working, again, we have to remember we have 8 members that aren't working. So there's a lot of overtime being done. So how our schedule works, we have 5 and 6 schedules, and then they're off for 4 or off for 5. So if a member's off for 4 days, just works 6 shifts, so 2 day shifts and 4 night shifts, and then they're off for 2 days, and we're asking them to come in to work overtime, they're burning out. Our members are burning out, just like our hospital staff and many other businesses, and like our members are burning out right now, and that's a direct correlation to that. We had about 4 or 5 members that really took advantage of our enhanced policing agreement. So that's where we did some enforcement education pieces. It's very difficult and challenging, and it's across the board. It's just not our detachment area.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that my interpretation was correct and that nobody was looking at these stats and going, oh my goodness, look at how we're, obviously traffic, we're driving much better. I hope that people will learn over time, but when you see such stark reductions, I thought very much it must be due to the staffing challenges.
Yeah, and we are working much more closely. So, and I used to call it the integrated traffic units. So the sheriffs are no longer integrated with our RCMP officers. So now the integrated RCMP traffic unit has now gone to Alberta. It's called ART. Alberta RCMP Traffic is the new term for our integrated traffic unit. So we've been working very closely with them. So they're stationed out of Banff Detachment, and they cover this area. So thankfully, we've been able to team up. If I only have 1 or 2 members, and if traffic only has 1 member, then we'll put 2 members out on the road doing traffic. But their primary responsibility is the highway. But they do come in town, and they've been helping us a tremendous amount, even with calls for service in town. So we have a very good working relationship with them, and we want to keep it that way.
Just one question before I go to Councillor Faubert. Do you foresee the situation with staffing getting better, or is there something that's needed in order to make it better?
So it's the same challenge we have everywhere, affordable housing. I'm not sure if we've ever heard this before council. That is a huge challenge for us, just like everywhere else. We are actively working with staffing to try to backfill positions as soon as we can. And even though our traffic, we knew this was coming, we predicted this, and we were able to backfill a couple positions. So on paper, we're actually 2 above where we should be. But because of how billing works and everything else, we're still way below. So if we didn't make those decisions a year or 2 ago, we would have been in a lot of trouble right now. Okay. But we're hopeful. We have very good members. I would like to say we don't have members taking advantage of everything. We have members that are working through a lot of trauma. We have members working through a lot of personal stresses. We're here to support them. And we have very good members backfilling and helping us out. So Canmore's a beautiful place. People know that. So.
Thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Singleton, for your presentation. I was wondering if you could speak a bit to the priority on enhancing road safety and specifically around electric-assisted bikes and scooters, and there are more and more of these on our roads and trails and interacting part of the ecosystem out there. From your perspective, from enforcement and education, how are you addressing this change in the network?
Well, this is very timely because I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'm very red and very warm right now because I just came off the bike course.
Okay.
So you're going to see 12 members pedaling through town right now. So we have 4 other detachments in town right now training for our RCMP bike course. So believe it or not, even though we're avid bikers, we have to take an RCMP course. So starting Monday until Thursday, we have all these extra members in town. So I just came off Lady McDonald about 30 minutes ago. So those are some of the things. So it is very difficult for us due to resourcing. So as part of our bike rodeo, those are all training pieces to train the kids, to train the adults, to train the parents, to make us visible out there. So I've been jumping on a bike with a couple of our members and doing that, but we just don't have resources to deal with that right now, but it is something. So we've been working with Kananaskis Public Safety, we've been working with municipal enforcement to try to make a presence and be more visible out there. Yeah, it starts with being visible, right? And enforcement, educating bike shops, having the bike roads, doing the positive ticketing. Like, it's absolutely amazing how motivated I've had a couple of my members by just, they're looking positive tickets. Great idea, not really buying into it. Then they started having those positive interactions with people and it completely changed them. And one member went out and issued 25 positive tickets one day. Like, it's working, right? So it's doing those pieces and moving forward and being aware of it, right? So, yeah.
Councillor McCallum.
I just wanted to go back to the housing statement that you made earlier. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but are there some communities in Canada that actually have on-site RCMP house? I'm thinking of Creston for some reason.
You're 100%. I don't believe Creston does. So,
okay. There's all these little houses that are right adjacent to the RCMP detachment there, so that's why.
Yeah, it's called force housing. It's a term that we use for force housing. So it is very expensive, so that is something that the communities agree to. So RCMP members make good money. We're compensated well for what we do. So it's always that balancing act on how you're compensated. So Fort McMurray does a northern allowance for RCMP members. They make an additional $12,000 a year to help subsidize that, and that's per RCMP officer member. So Lake Louise has forced housing, so they charge.
It sounds aggressive, forced housing.
Yeah,
you
will
live here.
RCMP, the force. So
I just heard the D at the end, like
so
forced
Lake Louise,
housing.
and it's all. And I don't want to give trade secrets. Like, this is something we can have a conversation.
No, I'm just asking.
Yeah. So Lake Louise has RCMP barracks,
Yeah.
if we want to use a better term,
Yeah,
housing. Banff,
Which is typical with the entire workforce there too as well, which makes sense.
Banff has some, not all, and I believe the majority of the Banff houses are actually here in Canmore. And Kananaskis has 3 for previous Kananaskis detachment, which is now Stony Nakota. So we are surrounded by communities that have some, but the challenge is there. So Banff is having if I can speak on behalf of Banff RCMP, they're having a huge challenge getting resources because they're looking at people coming, either recruits or new members or members that have service coming to the community. And I had this conversation with staffing last week because we put a staffing question out to try to find a member. The priority right now is Banff, and every single person says, do you have a force house available in Banff? No, I'm not interested.
Right. And so are these houses, is it like for their families, or is it just sort of you come and do your 4 days on and then 4 days off, that kind of shift
So Fort
work?
McMurray had I'm not sure, I'm dating myself, 4 years ago, Fort McMurray had condos
Right.
that were exactly that. If
Okay.
people came up, they could stay there. Traditionally, it is a house, and it's based on rates. So
Right.
the house might be, like Louise, $500 a month. So very cost effective. It's attracting people to go there because they're going to be able to make money.
Make bank, yeah.
If you're, and I can speak to Kananaskis, because I was in Cochrane, the Kananaskis houses are about $1,200 a month. And then there's other rules that go along on utilities and stuff like that. So on average, and Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, it's typically between $1,200 to $1,500 is the typical house rent.
Okay. I was just curious, because
Yeah.
I just was curious.
Yeah, so again, quite a few of our members are commuters right now. So we have, as far as Calgary members traveling in, we have quite a few in Cochrane, we have quite a few in Deadman Flats, Lac des Arcs, right? So, yeah, still the valley, yeah.
Great.
The only other thing I was going to bring up, and I understand the focus on the bicycle rodeo and everything else, we just had, as a council, had a conversation about this earlier, but I think there's a real, like, integrated responsibility amongst all users. I can't count how many times my life has been put in danger as I'm following every rule of the road on my bike by a vehicle. And I believe the Outlook put an article out a couple of months ago stating that 90% of road users in Alberta engage in distracted driving. So you could follow every rule in the book as a cyclist and you still don't have a fighting chance. I just don't think it's necessarily fair to vilify one user over another, and I just wanted to make that statement.
Yep, and
But
I agree. It's,
And yeah, I see, we see pedestrians, we see cyclists, we see vehicles. It's all about giving respect and getting respect. But I appreciate the bike rodeo. I think it's great to teach kids when they're young how to be responsible. My kids, I just send them out the door and I'm like, nobody cares about you, don't
now we
forget.
just have to transition this to the adults as well.
Yeah, that's the trick, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's a
totally.
great community, right? Like, the members that are here on this course are blown away with the level of trails. We were driving around this morning as well as yesterday morning. We were doing rows of 1s and 2s and calling things out. It was pretty interesting, but we had a couple of people yell at us and most complied with it. So
Yeah.
I think we're moving forward in the right track.
Yeah, I taught my kids how to ride their bikes through the alleys of Canmore. That's the funnest place to learn, I think. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions. There we go. Councillor Faubert, and I just remind council,
Sorry.
push it to go on, but then keep your hands off.
I did.
Yeah.
Until I pressed it again to signal that I had a question. I had a second question, and then Councillor McCallum's question has turned it into a two-parter. Do you have an update on the renovations for the detachment? And then, has there ever been any thought of using that property, because it's quite a large lot, for employee housing, which is contemplated in that land use district and the municipal development plan? Thank you.
So to answer your question, the renovation is sucking the life out of me. Because...
Whoa. Can of worms.
Yes. It is a challenge. We're in the last update I sent about 3 emails last week asking for updates. It's in the procurement stage, so it is out of the hands of RCMP and it's into procurement. So to answer your question is, they told us it was going to start before the snow's flying. I don't foresee that. I know that money has to be spent before the end of the fiscal year, so it has to have at least started before 2023. So my prediction is it's going to start, like we're already close to October. So I'm thinking like January, February,
So
maybe, but it's going to be over a 2-year period now.
Because I know your fiscal year and our fiscal year are different.
Correct.
So you mean the calendar fiscal year?
Oh, sorry. So money has to be spent before April 2023.
There we
So,
go.
but they predict that it's going to take a longer period of time. So it's probably not going to get built out until 2024, the renovation. So our lots, so as most of the council saw, our detachment is getting quite old. As we're looking to increase our resources, we are having to come up with some ideas on how to do things. In an ideal world, we would just add an extra 10 feet or 15 feet to that detachment. Whether that's possible or not, it would be too small to put housing on that property.
Dr. Cottle.
I'm reluctant to ask this, but, and I should know, but I can't remember. I'm wondering if you remember. If the province decides to transition to a provincial police force, what will become of that building in the renovation?
It's a federal building. It's a federally owned building. So there's a lot of ifs when we're having that conversation. It's our understanding that there may be an announcement on October the 6th.
Yes, that's ours as well.
And I think there's a lot, so again, we're talking politics, so we don't really know what exactly is going to happen. I think with the provincial police review, I think there's some benefits to some of the points they're making, but I think there's also a lot of negative points and a lot of unknowns. The devil's in the details, and we don't know a lot of those details. My prediction would be if they did go to a provincial police force, it's probably going to be a fairly lengthy transition period. And I only base that off of my knowledge on what's happening with
other places.
Surrey.
Right. So presumably any decision about the renovation in that building would be between the province and the federal government.
Yeah. And the last conversation I had with our RCMP asset management would be if the town of Canmore agreed to a new detachment within, I can't remember if it was 2 years or 3 years, they would cancel it. So as you're aware, the RCMP are paying the costs of the renovation, so that's not being placed on the community.
Thanks, yeah.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, we're doing a microphone rodeo right now, so. Yeah. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your time today and for bringing us these updates and answering all of our questions. Thank you.
Thank you again for giving me the opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we will now go back to D2, and that's municipal enforcement. Mr. Burt, welcome to council.
Thank you, Mayor Krauser, members of council. Nice to see you again. Seems like I just saw you yesterday. Here to present on our statistics from January 1st to June 30th. 4 kind of key themes I'm going to touch on. 1, staffing. You've heard that in the previous presentation. Our complement is 5 full-time community peace officers. For the first 6 months of the year, we ran extremely short. Due to different reasons, staff pursuing other opportunities. So we had 2 CPOs for the month of January, and then 1 from February to June. So we were running at a 20% staffing capacity. Do want to highlight that we are supported by a bylaw services officer who now has transitioned into the community peace officer, and we are also supported by 2 casual community peace officers that work in other jurisdictions full-time. I'm proud to report that honestly, as of today, the last appointment came in, so all of our staff are fully trained, full community peace officers, fully outfitted, fully equipped. We've gone through the CPO2 to CPO1 transition for the past couple of years, so kudos to the team for going through that. Thank you. It has been a long time. And let me tell you, as being the old guy on the team going through some of that transition training, it was some of the most challenging physical stuff I've ever done. But I got through it.
Well done.
Through those 5 months, 6 months, the team really pulled together. So everyone pulled it from the administrative staff, like I said, to the casuals, to the bylaw services, to the 1 community peace officer. Really proud to report that we maintained a high level of customer service. We were still really responsive to residents' concerns, but you'll see in the statistics that obviously our proactive dropped. Just to tie into the overtime discussion, overtime is not an option for our staff. So under the employment standards averaging hours agreement, we work on a 4-on and a 3-off, so we work a compressed work week, and we are not allowed to do overtime unless there's extraordinary circumstances. So that's one of our challenges. We did have staff, or we've had in the staff past, that said they want to do overtime, but we're restricted from offering it. So it's just one of the challenges we deal with. From an investigation standpoint, we saw a 23% overall decrease in investigations. This is both proactive. You'll hear me say proactive. You've heard me say that for years. That's an officer-initiated investigation where we go out and we identify fruit on a tree, and we're following up with residents. We see a vehicle that hasn't moved in an extended period of time. So there is an expectation that officers are out identifying infractions and following up with that. Par for the course for several years, approximately 50% of our calls or investigations are related to traffic and road use. The majority are parking infractions, parking for longer than 72 hours, and parking on private property without the consent of the owner. We did, I know this is the Q1, Q2, but just want to touch on a couple of highlights. We did adjust our hours once staff were back from their community peace officer training in July. So we started at 6:30 in the morning, and we're running some shifts till 8 o'clock at night. So the 6:30 shifts are primarily intended to deal with the overnight camping situation, where the bylaw prohibits it from midnight to 8 a.m., so we can get out earlier, and then 8 p.m. just having more of a presence in the community. Transitioning back in October, we'll be back to our 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. We do operate 7 days a week. We continue to remind the community, give us a call, send us an email, happy to respond. Warnings and tickets, there's a 31% decrease in warnings and tickets from last year. No surprise, reduced staffing, and then the other key was the change of the paid parking vendor. So that was one of the big changes. We did put more of an increased focus on dogs off leash, and like I was saying, camping on a highway or public place. And then you'll see later in the admin reports, the September focus primarily focused on crosswalk safety, school zone safety, not included in the report, but just want to highlight. We've been doing a large proactive focus on wildlife attractant removal, primarily in the Cougar Creek area. So officers have been out walking through the community, identifying fruit-bearing trees, fruit-bearing vegetation, speaking with property owners on a compliance-based approach, seeking to get them to remove the fruit without having to issue warnings or tickets. We've seen a really high level of compliance. One of the older neighborhoods, well-established neighborhoods, really good communications, also a great opportunity for officers to be highly visible in the community and have other conversations. So those are the highlights from Q1 and Q2, and just a few snapshots from activities this summer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burt. And I will ask Councillor Faubert for a question.
I was speedy with that one. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Burt. We recently approved the new community standards bylaw. Have you had a chance to do any enforcement under that so far, and what has been the experience?
The majority has been the change to the wildlife attractants and recognizing that it's been in place for a number of years. So again, that's where our primary focus has come in. We have received a complaint about a community standards issue, a community property, that it's far easier for officers now to go out and clearly lay out the expectations that were set by council.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Burt, thank you. I wanted to chat about the off-leash dog tickets. 14 tickets in Q1 and Q2?
Correct.
And 46 warnings. I see 14 off-leash dogs in any given walk I'm on. I'm wondering why that number is so low and why we're issuing so many warnings in that department.
We were focusing more on compliance in Q1 and Q2. We were doing some training with new officers as well. And we've had a discussion within the department about what we're trying to accomplish. And really the goal is achieving compliance, getting people to walk their dogs on leash.
Absolutely.
And I would say that It has shifted since Q1 and Q2 to a more enforcement-based approach and less of an education-based approach.
So we can expect to see those numbers increase on the number of tickets and less warnings?
I haven't seen the statistics, but I would expect to see that there would be an increase.
I would love to see that.
I'll do that next time. Councillor Moore, did you have a question? Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Burt. Yeah. No, I'm just mentioning it mostly this time is because it really screws up my ability to call on the next person. Moving to D3. Ms. Miller, automated traffic enforcement.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Council. So I'm here today to talk about automated traffic enforcement stats. So our automated traffic enforcement violations have returned to 2019 numbers for Q1 and Q2, with an average of 5 violations per hour being issued fines. That said, the fine revenue is not at the 2019 amount because of the 2020 change to provincial fine retention, which increased the portion that the province keeps. Violations and hours both decreased in June, which can be attributed to the poor weather and heavy rainfall. The Bow Valley Trail at Ray McBride Street Zone near the Wapiti Campground continues to be the highest infraction zone. As a reminder, all zones are posted on the Town of Canmore website and in the Rocky Mountain Outlook. Non-residents continue to make up the majority of speeding infractions within the Town of Canmore, and the 30-70 split trend has continued throughout 2022. Collision data is now available from the province and is reviewed monthly. Quarterly reports are sent to the Solicitor General's office, which detail the location descriptions, the justifications for the zone, the posted speed limit, the average daily traffic volume and deployment hours, the average speeds, and the total number of speed notices issued and the total number of collisions in these zones. As a point of interest, the automated traffic enforcement vehicle has been upgraded to a hybrid vehicle. So this transition occurred in August of this year and has reduced idling by 50% compared to the conventional truck. So in addition, Global Traffic Group uses power for renewable energy sources in their processing center, and electric vehicle deployment is still being investigated and considered for the future. So we did re-sign the contract this year, and one of the requests from council was that we ask them for the green initiatives, and those were the green initiatives that they came back with. And that is all. It's a pretty quick update today.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Miller. You know, when I see the marked difference of percentage of tickets to residents versus non-residents, and I'm assuming there's not that greater a proportion of traffic, so it's not the same percentage of each demographic of traffic. I'm thinking that the awareness with the residents results in lower numbers. Have you given much thought of how, which of course, by the way, the awareness of residents gives lower numbers, and that goes to the safety effect of automated ticketing. Have you given much thought to how we increase awareness with visitors?
Mm-hmm. Now that we've signed the contract with the provider, we just recently had a meeting with them and the RCMP to discuss the requirement in the guidelines to have signage attached. We had notification from them that the signage was on order and that we should see it deployed shortly. So we're waiting to see what that looks like, to see how it's operationalized. It has to be done before December 1st, but we asked them to do it before then.
Okay, and that's just the signage of where the vehicle is at that time. Okay. I was just wondering if there's maybe increased signage in other zones too, because ultimately we'd much rather have everybody going the correct speed limits and no revenue.
On a lot of our signs in town, we do have photo enforced placed under it, under the traffic, the speed limit sign.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, for your presentation. I definitely see the photo enforced sign in the zones. I think from a communication perspective, Any ideas, like, prior to, like, on arrival in the community, like, this is a town where if you abuse our roads, we will make you pay. Like, that would be slightly different than sort of like those little signs. So, but I don't know, we don't do sign, we only have like a welcome to Canmore sign. My question is, what would happen if the signage that Global comes out with is not acceptable? Like, it seems to me we're not being asked whether or not we like what the signage is. We have to wait until we see the signage. And what happens if we don't like, or?
And I think that's where we can talk with the contractor to set what the expectations are, how it's working, test out how it works, and see if another solution is appropriate in that.
Yeah, because I knew that the new rule was out. I guess I never put any thought into how that signage would be developed. And my assumption was it would be done in consultation with us and per our approval. So I look forward to how that unfolds. I will not touch my button.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. This button, there's always something at every meeting, like a theme, and today it's the button. I've got a couple questions for you. Statistically, can we see how much time was spent, how much revenue or fines were collected in school and playground zones?
I don't have that today, but I could break that down for the annual report.
I would very much like to see those numbers, yes. And you say that Bow Valley Trail, and there was no other location that continued to be a challenge?
Bow Valley Trail at Ray McBride, so that's by the Wapiti campground, that continues to be the biggest challenge.
What plans do we have to help engineer solutions that will solve those challenges?
That's a really good question. So we do I speak frequently with the manager of engineering about where we're seeing a lot of speeding infractions, how we can engineer those. I know that they have a project to bring forward this year to talk about more traffic safety initiatives with their capital projects. So look forward to that as well.
Yeah, photo radar's not really doing the trick in those locations. We need to play a different card, in my opinion. So I look forward to those more detailed stats in the fall.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for the presentation. Going back to the resident versus non-resident infractions, it's a fairly even percentage across the board there. Do we have stats on, like, do we know if with the residents in town, is it repeat offenders, or is it, do we carry those kind of things where we, you know, if there are repeat offenders, we can reach out and be like, why? Do some education?
We don't get those stats as to who the offenders are. We just get the high level, like, aggregate stats.
Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Sorry, one more follow-up. I noticed in the RCMP report that their traffic enforcement was down markedly, but collisions were exactly the same. And you'd mentioned that collision data was coming as well, correct?
Yeah, so we do get collision data. There were only 2 collisions in automated traffic enforcement zones for all of 2022. What we are seeing a lot of is collisions in parking lots. So we were, the manager of engineering and I, Mr. Asarte, we were reviewing the collision data recently, and we had noticed a trend of there being a lot of collisions reported in parking lots.
That's fairly standard across every municipality, though, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
parking lots are a dangerous place.
It's hard when you're backing up.
Yeah, okay. I look forward to those stats. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Miller, for that report. And now we'll move to, what time are we at? Yeah, let's get this one in. We'll move to D5, the 2022 Mid-Year Fire Rescue Report. Chief Bushy, welcome to Council.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Great afternoon to be here. I'm just going to present on year-to-date for the Canmore Fire and Rescue. So A lot going on for us in the past year. Peak staffing at the top of the list here. We started that at the beginning of the year. It's running the entire year. It's been very successful so far. So a lot of improvements with regards to the responses and keeping down the number of general pages, so calling out the rest of the department. So it's worked fairly effectively there. Casual firefighters, so we did promote some people out of the paid responder group into the casual firefighter group, so we're keeping those numbers up. A lot of training over this past year. We've been doing a lot more closer training with Alberta Forestry and the helitack crews that are the first ones in out of the Elbow base to be coming to Canmore in the event of something happening. So we've been doing a much tighter cross-training with them and getting in a position where we can work side by side with them with anything that happens in the Bow Valley. On top of that, we just finished this past weekend a very specialized course on the wildland-urban interface and how the department can position itself to better interact with the fire when it's basically coming towards town, draining down on town, and how we can protect structures in that environment. So we did a very specific course on that this past weekend. Mutual aid agreement, I've just got to get forestry sat down to give it to them, but we've got that signed on our behalf. And then we did a series of fire bans over the summer in kind of conjunction with Alberta Forestry. And again, we're kind of getting into another dry season, so it might be an anomaly, but we may see another one if the drying trend continues. Capital projects, we had some gas detection equipment to be bought, so we awarded a contract to Draeger on that. We're just waiting for the equipment to come in. Working closely with PCL and Leslie with regards to the build on the fire hall, which is coming along fairly well at this time. Emergency management, we did obviously participate in the Georgetown exercise. We had a lot of work we did within the Rainfall event. Fire Smart home assessments are continuing, and Deputy Chief Martins is going to talk to you about a FREA grant a little later. Prevention, lots of prevention activities are underway. We do have going through the process to get a Deputy Chief of Prevention and Training to fill out a lot of the duties we do within the department. We had a past history there where we were trying to get a fire prevention officer, and that wasn't working out, so we did a pivot, and we're going to go after and recruit a Deputy Chief to fill those roles. Fire Prevention Week's coming up, so we are going to do a pancake breakfast on the 15th, so I invite you all to that. And then there'll be events in the schools for the week leading up to that, so we're planning for those activities. Medical co-response, we're working a lot closer with our medical director, Dr. Wickham, on training and some direction within the medical program. Out of that, we identified a need to have some more a procedure in place for those outages when Alberta Health Services is not available to the community. As you know, that we are going to be there first most of the time, and then what do we do when there's a 30-minute plus wait? So we did approach Calgary because I know that they had something in place, and they had tailed onto Edmonton, so this policy kind of came from the Edmonton and Calgary regions. They've actually enacted it a few times. So we adopted it for our own purposes, which allows us basically in conjunction with a medical director from Alberta Health Services, in that event that it is the correct thing to do for the patient, we have the ability to find a means to get them to the hospital, and or wait, and or encourage them to get to the hospital themselves. So it's all patient and at the time for resources dependent on how we go forward. But we're working in conjunction with Alberta Health Services in that policy, which is attached for your review there. And that closes out a couple of little stats I guess I should share with you. Year to date, we're at 562 calls for service, 53% of those being medical calls. General pages are quite down from previous years. due to the fact that, again, we are staffing up that first engine with a crew that can go out and deal with the vast majority of the calls that we encounter. We're predicting a year end of about 750 calls for the year, so slightly up again. Not a significant amount, but we are looking to be, again, trending upwards. 6 minutes on average time that we're spending on scene before AHS arrives for medical calls. And that's my presentation to you.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Graham.
I'm just going to start off with that last comment you made. Thank you for your presentation. EMS has made some changes to their program in the last little while. Is that correct? We've got a CT scan here in town. We're not transferring as many people. There's been some minor changes, correct?
Yes, on a system-based level, but at the actual EMS level, we're not really seeing any impacts yet.
Okay. The response time at 6 minutes beforehand, is that up or down? Are we getting there?
It's
Are they getting
trending
any better?
upwards.
Trending upwards.
It's trending upwards, and the
Trending in
real
the wrong
concern
direction.
for us is the times when we're there for a long period of time. Those calls, which prompted that online medical control policy,
Right.
those are growing.
Okay. So we're going in the wrong direction still. That's unfortunate. I hope. Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Chief Bushy, for your presentation. What's the difference between a fire prevention officer versus the role of a deputy chief of prevention and training?
So it's the portfolio, right? So the portfolio is standalone inside the union. So a floor person doing fire prevention was really hard to recruit for many different reasons. So instead of trying to beat our heads against the wall and do the same thing over and over again, it was my recommendation that we go forward and recruit it into the administration side.
Okay.
And there's a far greater pool of candidates out there that are looking to move up through the ranks, get their, cut their teeth as a deputy chief to move on to chief, or just, be at this deputy chief role for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, this has become a bit more of a coordinator position. So being able to coordinate the fire prevention portfolio as well as the training portfolio, another gap that was brought forward as something within the department that we needed to address a little more from a coordination point of view. The staff has quite agreed to continue being the front line of doing the inspections on the prevention side, also as well as take on some roles of more role on the training side, which needs to happen. So this deputy would be someone that has a higher level of prevention abilities, so they could take on the more complicated ones, coordinate the whole program, and kind of continue to grow it to the point where then we can be in a position to hire a prevention officer much down the road as the community grows.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I understand better now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you very much, Chief, for being here today.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
And I'm going to call a break now for 15 minutes. Return again at 3:15. All right, we're moving to item D6, briefing of the Georgetown exercise update. Deputy Chief Martins, welcome to council.
Thank you. Cheryl, can we get this up on the screen? Or? Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councillors, administration. Thanks for your time today. I'd like to take just the next several minutes to give you a brief update on the Georgetown exercise from June, way back in June. Not sure where the summer has gone. But. So to recap, the Georgetown wildfire exercise ran over a 2-day period in early June and was a follow-up to the functional exercise held almost a year ago now in last November. This boots-on-the-ground exercise was designed to test activation of the Emergency Coordination Center, the Municipal Emergency Management Plan, and the Structure Protection Plan. The exercise began with a wildfire start inside Banff National Park on a Friday afternoon, and by the evening, the fire had crossed out of the national park in the town of Canmore and Kananaskis Improvement District lands. The fire continued to grow, and by the end of the exercise on Saturday afternoon, we had flame impingement within the Larch neighborhood. This exercise, as well as meeting one of our obligations under the lemur, provided an opportunity to train and build relationships with our internal and external partners, which is as valuable and as crucial to our success as testing our plans is. The threat of wildfire is certainly not the only threat our community faces, but it is a significant one that will have far-reaching impacts on an individual, on our community, and at a regional level. In order to make the most of this opportunity, the planning team got together to determine just what our objectives were following the functional exercise last fall. We knew it was important to test how useful and how effective our plans would be. We need to know that what works on paper also works in practice. And the preferred way to do that is through an exercise, rather than waiting for the real event to take place. More importantly, if it doesn't work, we need to know how we can improve it. Assessing our internal and external communication was also an important piece of this exercise. We wanted to take a look at how information would flow between and through the ECC and the ICP, and then out to the field. As you can imagine, when you bring 150 people together from multiple agencies, communication can be a challenge. So determining the best way for field responders to communicate prior to an incident is crucial to and directly impacts any outcome. The communication and information flow objective also looked at the what and how of information that needs to be relayed to the residents and to the general public. This can prove additionally challenging in a destination location such as the Bow Valley. So how did it go? Well, one of the purposes of the exercise was to test multiple facets of the town's emergency response capabilities. The Emergency Coordination Center was set up here in council chambers, and an incident command post was established on the Alberta Social Housing Corporation lands, commonly referred to as the Mustache lands. The activation of the Emergency Coordination Center provided employees an opportunity to gain confidence and experience in their roles. Working relationships with partnering agency administrators and emergency coordination centers were further developed and strengthened. Changes made to the ECC activation guide after the November exercise were implemented and were successful. Within the ICP, a unified command structure was established due to the multiple jurisdictions involved in the event, bringing together Parks Canada, Alberta Wildfire, Kananaskis Improvement District, and Town of Canmore encouraged a collaborative approach to the response that allowed for improved coordination and information flow. The EVAC security branch tested the evacuation plan by going door to door in the Larch neighborhood to notify residents of both the evacuation alert and then an evacuation order. We now have a better understanding of how long the evacuation will take place, or will take. Importantly, branch members had the opportunity to briefly engage with residents to provide information and answer questions.
The Structure Protection Branch broke into 3 groups to test the structure protection plan. A perimeter sprinkler line was set up to provide protection along the outside edge of the Larch neighborhood. A second group established protection at several locations around the Canmore Nordic Centre. And the third group tested equipment at multiple locations in Harvey Heights. This exercise could not have taken place without our mutual aid and jurisdictional partners. There were over 150 people from more than 20 organizations and agencies. Agencies from across the Bow Valley, as well as almost every department within the town of Canmore, participated in this 2-day event. The ECC brought together Town of Canmore staff and partners from AEMA, Kananaskis Improvement District, MD Bighorn, Alberta Wildfire, and Banff National Park. Mentors were in place throughout the exercise and were there to assist and answer any questions that might have come up. The ICP was a mix of response partners from across the Bow Valley, stretching to include Cochrane and Calgary. Teams for the evacuation branch as well as the structure protection branch consisted of a mix of multiple agencies, which further enhanced the training and the learning environment, which again brings us back to building the relationships that we will need to rely on. So the big question is, what did we learn? Well, exercises such as this provide valuable time to build relationships with our partner agencies before incidents take place. This relationship building ensures our teams are familiar with each other and the differences in our operations. A response activation of this kind and on this scale requires a strong foundation rooted in relationships, communications, and plans. The exercise produced recommendations that will help us update our Municipal Emergency Management Plan, our ECC Activation Plan, our Evacuation Plan, our communications, both internal and external, and our Structure Protection Plan. Some of these changes have already been made, and others are scheduled to take place over the next several months. Some of the key learnings include establishing clear radio communication channels for responding agencies, elevating emergency social services within the organizational chart, and increasing training opportunities. Our people are key to our success, and this work for the majority of town staff is outside of a typical day. We recognize the challenges that come when staff are requested to work outside of their normal and perform tasks and functions that are different from their everyday. That said, it is only through their involvement that we will get through the first few days. So how do we set ourselves up for success? Development of an ICS structured training program and plan that will include position-specific training has begun, so that when we ask people to fill roles in the organizational chart, they will be better prepared to do so. Building knowledge and skills will lead to confidence and depth in these roles, which will in turn set our community up for success when a disaster event occurs, regardless of the type. All in all, it was a really good exercise. It was a really great couple of days. I would like to think that everyone that participated learned something, and it's always great when you can learn something and have a good time doing it. We'd really like to make sure we thank everyone for their participation, their willingness to learn, and their support, and thanks to Council for your continued support on these.
Thank you. My first question for you is, which of those windows is the one that's hitting your head?
It's that one right there.
The second one?
Yeah, the second one.
Yeah. Perfect. We'll take care of that first. There we go.
There we go.
Great, thank you. Okay. Thank you for that overview. I am so not only am I happy that that exercise went through because so many things are learned, but also because of our next item, the heavy rainfall event, you just got everybody sort of prepped and even more prepared for that. So
it did.
Thank you. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Martins, or Deputy Director of Emergency Management Martins, for your report and all your hard work on organizing this event and hosting it here in our community. I noticed on the who was involved screen, our logo was the smallest, which is humbling. Thank you. But where do we go from here? Like, we've done the how do we use this exercise to build upon our plan? Does this go into your work plans, a business plan, budget? What can we expect as council?
That might be more of a Caitlin question, I think.
So it certainly goes into our work plan. It goes into the updates for our municipal emergency management plan. It gives us, as Carrie mentioned earlier, the training plan for position-specific training. It gives us, it kind of sets what the priorities are going to be over the next couple of years and how we can adjust and move forward those priorities. So it was really great learning and great to be able to work with some of those regional partners in a way that truly reinforce that those relationships are important.
As a follow-up, are we planning then another exercise within a certain time frame to test our adjustments after this one?
So we are required to do a exercise every year. It does not need to be a large-scale functional exercise. It can be a tabletop. And then we take that learning plus the learnings that we have every time we activate the ECC to further develop our plan.
Yeah, it takes, as you can imagine, I'm sure it takes a lot to put together a full-scale field exercise. So we can still do a lot of work just with tabletop exercises instead. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you for this, Deputy Chief Martins. This is awesome. When you guys go to practice exercises in years to come, I'm assuming the fire model that you'll use will change each year to kind of stress test the team, because I think we had a discussion before, the fire that was used or in the computer modeling for here, it had a certain type of behavior, and maybe future models, the fire will be more aggressive or more challenging.
Definitely, and we are seeing changes in, fire behavior from, even from 5 years ago. I think, in this respect, the next emergency exercise we do will probably not be fire-based because, we recognize that it's not the only thing we have to be thinking about. But certainly, we would want to use, for future fire-based exercises, we would want to start a fire in a different location or have it act in different ways.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Mara, do you have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your
Thank
presentation today. We'll now move to item D7, the June 2022 heavy rainfall event. Ms. Miller.
Okay, thanks again for having me. Mr. Asarte and I will be jointly presenting this presentation. So on June 13th, 2022, the town of Canmore activated its Emergency Coordination Center, or ECC, in response to the forecasted heavy rainfall that had the potential to cause flooding within the municipality. The ECC was activated from Monday, June 13th at 9 a.m. to Wednesday, June 15th at 9 a.m. This proactive and coordinated response allowed the town to provide timely emergency communication to residents and stakeholders and enabled the flexibility to respond to changing conditions. So though it needs no background, but in June 2013, the town of Canmore did experience widespread flooding from steep creeks in the Bow River that caused extensive damage throughout the municipality. So learnings from that event were applied in the preparation and the plans that were used in the June 2022 heavy rainfall event response. On Friday, June 10th, in response to forecasted heavy rainfalls, fire rescue services began monitoring the Bow River and steep creeks on a formalized schedule. A flood warning was issued by the Alberta Forecast Centre on Sunday, June 12th for the Bow River. High-range estimates for rainfall amounts and Bow River flow rates were similar to 2013 and were expected to peak on Wednesday, June 15th. Given the information from the Alberta River Basin forecasters, a decision was made to activate the Emergency Coordination Center the following morning on Monday, June 13th. That evening, myself, the Manager of Engineering, the Manager of Public Works, and the Deputy Fire Chief met at the Civic Center to pre-plan operations for the following week. The Emergency Coordination Center was activated the morning of June 13th, and work was quickly underway to protect critical infrastructure in coordination with internal and external partners. The Public Works team quickly put together sandbags that were later available for residents. Fortunately, the flood warning for the Bow River was downgraded to a flood watch on the evening of June 13th. The steep creeks still posed a considerable risk due to the considerable snowpack that was remaining at that time. The monitoring program continued overnight, and special attention was paid to the Cougar Creek construction site. On the 14th, the flood watch was further downgraded to a flood advisory. It was determined that evening that no overnight emergency coordination center operations were required. And on the morning of the 15th, the rainfall was deemed to be considerably less than forecasted, and the risk of overland or steep creek flooding was minimized. The overnight monitoring program ceased, and the Emergency Coordination Center was demobilized. And later that morning, Mr. Sarte and I went to the Cougar Creek construction site for a site visit, and he'll provide details on our visit in a moment. So the Emergency Coordination Center had several priorities, including protecting lives, protecting critical infrastructure, and protecting the environment. Communication to the public throughout the event was proactive and timely. Detailed emergency updates were provided to ensure residents, businesses, and visitors had the information they needed to stay safe throughout the event. Sandbags were made available for residents at the Public Works Building, and the acting CAO maintained contact with the Mayor and Council throughout the event. The ECC worked closely with representatives from EPCOR and the RCMP throughout the event. Communication with AHS regarding the hospital was done early on and followed up with the next day. Alpine Helicopters was notified of the event and was in contact with the ECC following the activation. Local contractors were put on standby if equipment was needed. Cochrane Search and Rescue had 12 volunteers on standby to assist if an evacuation order were required. The ECC and Manager of Engineering stayed in close contact with the Cougar Creek debris flood retention structure construction site, and communication with the Directors of Emergency Management and ECCs in Kananaskis Improvement District and the MD of Bighorn, the Town of Banff, and Stoney, Dakota occurred throughout the event. The ECC stayed in contact with the Alberta Emergency Management Agency Field Officer and Provincial Operations Center, and the ECC Director participated in a regional call regarding potential flooding on the afternoon of June 13th. Furthermore, the ECC was in direct contact with Alberta River Forecasting Team and the University of British Columbia weather forecasting team throughout the event. Several media interviews were conducted with the ECC Director throughout the event. So I have some pictures here just of what we were seeing when we were doing our Steep Creek monitoring. So on this first one here is just monitoring from the Elk Run Boulevard culvert and the Trans-Canada culvert, or the 1A culvert on Cougar Creek. And I just added one of the pictures from overnight to show what we were looking at overnight. And this is off the construction site. We also did monitoring throughout the day. That's at the Three Sisters Creek, and then down in Spring Creek, where we were seeing a lot of ground flooding. So we were monitoring both the creeks, the river, and we were monitoring the groundwater to address nuisance flooding throughout town. I am now going to flip it over to Mr. Sarte.
Mr. Sarte, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Okay. On morning of June 13th, we activated a site-specific emergency response plan out by Cougar Creek. So one of the requirements of project permitting is to prepare this type of plan, and it was specific to flood. That plan has the contractor heading up all operations on the site, and so they spent the remainder of the day moving material out of hazard areas. They removed 2 sets of culverts, bypassed one and completely removed another set of culverts that provided site access but could block flow of the creek, and created a couple of diversions expecting water could leave the creek banks and to try to prevent it from going into the work site. Accessing upstream of the work site to a diversion channel that was created specifically to move floodwaters around the construction excavation monitoring was undertaken throughout. This area wasn't accessible for any kind of intervention, so the contractor wasn't comfortable moving construction crews up into that area. And so our monitoring on the site, apart from the work done to prepare, was done remotely. And so we had really excellent communication set up by the fire department to be able to monitor via camera, and that was done throughout. The measures that were taken by the contractor generally worked well for protecting site access. This is a shot showing the channel bypassing the culverts. Had that not been constructed, the access would have been lost. They were able to put it back in place essentially as soon as flows came down a little bit by the Wednesday. However, upstream it was a different set of challenges. And we have a video taken that helps illustrate what was going on upstream. So I'll just annotate a couple minutes of this video. This is that same diversion pond we were looking at in one of the photos. And what happened is throughout the course of the event, this pond completely filled with sediment. So it was designed for a certain amount of sediment. It filled with more sediment. That sediment was then conveyed down the diversion channel. And the diversion channel wasn't constructed for long-term sediment management. It was constructed for clear water. And so it took a beating. It was damaged throughout. Portions of it were pulled up, and other portions were punctured. Just wasn't made for sediment to travel through it. The main purpose of this diversion is to keep as much water out of those gravels as possible so that it doesn't enter into the excavation where they're building the foundation for the structure. That excavation is 15 meters deep. Trying to do any work in groundwater would be extremely challenging. So the purpose of this is to pull all that water out of that area. With the diversion damaged like this, the water is able to more freely flow directly into the excavation. And so I'll switch a little bit forward now. And this is a shot essentially showing what was the night before. It was a completely dewatered or mostly dewatered pond. When Ms. Miller and I visited the next morning, overnight, the water had started to infiltrate into the soils and had filled the pond. And it was at the point where it was starting to overflow, so they ended up digging out a bit of a secondary channel there just to manage overflow. So what did that mean for the project? It meant that that in combination with some of the other issues with rockfall associated with saturated slopes, it meant it took some time to be able to access the diversion channel at all. Then it took a whole bunch more time to repair the diversion channel and get flow out of the excavation, and then time to dewater the excavation in order to be able to restart construction. So the contractor estimated those impacts up front and are still being assessed at a 2-month delay for the project and up to $2 million of financial impact. And we're presently working with the insurance company to put in a claim for that. I'll turn it back now to Ms. Miller.
So other financial impacts, we discussed the Cougar Creek construction site, but 610 regular staff hours were dedicated to the event over those couple of days, and 165 overtime hours, which were either paid out as overtime or were banked as time. There was about only $4,000 spent on supplies throughout the event, and that was mostly sandbag supplies. We updated our maps. We got them printed on waterproof paper so that we could bring them out with us for the monitoring teams, which I should mention were made up of fire rescue and engineering employees. And we fed some of our staff throughout the event as well to make sure that they were taken care of. And we bought a drone, which helped us with our monitoring and getting some really good shots. It kept the staff out of the inclement weather and we were able to more safely access some of the sites. So ECC successes, the first one is if you're going to have an event, have it a week after an exercise, because that's very helpful in preparing all of the staff for the event. But in all seriousness, we did have a number of key successes throughout, and the early organization and deployment of the ECC staff, including clearly defining roles and responsibilities, meant that we were prepared for the worst case scenario early on. There was effective collection, analysis, and dissemination of forecast information from several sources, including municipal, provincial, and federal weather and forecasting, custom forecasts from UBC, and provincial forecasts that came with a very high range of potential outcomes. So the aggregation of these sources and subsequent analysis by the ECC team, and specifically our field engineer, Felix Canmore, allowed for an appropriate level of response throughout the event. Effective coordination among fire, EPCOR, Public Works, Engineering, Protective Services, Communications, Senior Administration, and Council allowed us to respond and communicate appropriately throughout the event. And the deployment of camera systems on Cougar Creek allowed for reducing resourcing for monitoring and kept staff out of inclement weather and potentially unsafe conditions. That said, we did have some learnings because you can't have an event without learning something. And we had the following recommendations after the response. So first, there's a need to update and formalize internal communication protocols within the Emergency Coordination Center to ensure that employees can operationalize quickly. Another recommendation is to ensure emergency social services are automatically activated with the activation of the Emergency Coordination Center. So because all emergency and disaster events will have a human impact, proactively engaging with our emergency social services colleagues can help lessen the impact. Lastly, as we had with the exercise, the recommendation for position-specific training for staff working in the Emergency Coordination Center was another recommendation. This training would ensure that staff can focus on the incident instead of relearning their role while simultaneously trying to respond to the information about the event that may be coming in rapidly. So again, overall, the activation and response to this heavy rainfall event was successful. Any questions?
That's a great question. Thank you for your presentations. Are there any questions? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, for your presentation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this would have been your first activation of the Emergency Coordination Center as our Manager of Protective Services.
Yes, and as your Director of Emergency Management. Yeah.
So from your perspective, is everything in place for success in terms of policies and processes? And are there any other thoughts you had going through that?
Yeah, I think with the recommendations that we brought forward, just with the activation of emergency social services, there's a big push throughout the province to elevate emergency social services and truly integrate it into an emergency management program and plan. So it often has worked in a silo, and it wasn't until over the past couple of years that it was actually addressed in the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. So there's a greater emphasis on emergency social services. We're understanding that any type of event has that human and social impact, and that they're really important to engage with early on. So that was one of the big learnings that we had. And then in terms of position-specific training, I think more training is always a good thing. So just having the people who we know are going to be in those roles have specific training to that role is very important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on both points. And I think for me, the first one became very apparent with the incident a couple years ago in September that I call Snow Carmageddon, where 350 people were evacuated off the Trans-Canada at the end of September and were at the rec center. And we didn't, in the 2013 flood, we didn't host a single person in our evacuation center because everyone in the community was taken in by the community. So just like this like, how do you incorporate the emergency social services into these situations better is an amazing.
And it's beyond the reception center, right?
Yeah.
So when we have an extreme heat, there might not be necessarily a reception center, but there might be a different need for resources or even wildfire smoke. But we have engaged with Tourism Canmore, Kananaskis as well, and have invited them to our agency meetings. So they came to the first one just last week, just to start talking to our other stakeholders and partners. Because when you think of, what did you call it, Snow Carmageddon?
Snow Carmageddon.
Yeah. So when you think of events like that, that mostly impacted visitors or people going through the community, how do we get the word out? How do we engage with those people a little bit differently? So when they're in town, they're a part of our community, but making sure that we have the right people at the table to address those needs is really important to us.
I'm particularly interested in knowing that we are doing this work for extreme heat incidents as well. So, and I know we are, but I think in the future we're going to have to activate differently. And so, thinking caps.
Yeah, they're on.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Too slow. We'll now move to councillor updates. Going through each section, any questions for me with my update? Seeing none. For Councillor Faubert, section 2. Seeing none for Councillor Graham. For Councillor Hillstad. And for Councillor Ma. None. Councillor Mara. Councillor McCallum.
For Councillor Mira, sorry.
Councillor Faubert.
It's because it was further back. Councillor Mara, within the Bow Valley Regional Housing June 2022 occupancy and wait list report, community housing projects in Canmore, in June, the wait list is down by half from May around, yeah, it's a 50% reduction at the very end on the graph there. Do you see that bar graph? Oh, you're muted.
Which page are we on?
It is page 24 of
page 24
of her report, or page 111 of 130. So really consistent wait list numbers over a long period of time, and then all of a sudden the wait list is down to 23, half of what it was for the last several years. And I'm just curious if there is any discussion around what's happening there. Are we seeing people leaving our community and pulling themselves from housing lists?
No, we have several on the waiting list. We have 24 on the waiting list. We have several units that are on reconstruction and being brought up to date. I know that coming up, you'll see that that graph move up. So in our next update, you'll see that change.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, there were some boards used to have a different reasoning, Ms. McCallum, Councillor McCallum.
I would say that that's the wait list, so that actually is people that have filled out applications and are waitlisted for a unit.
Oh, yes.
As opposed to the units that are available. I'm gonna guess, and this is a guess, we can confirm, that like once a year, there's a, like, call the people and say, hey, are you still wanting to be on the list, or do you have a place to live, or whatever? And then those qualified people would be purged from the wait list and it would begin to build again. That's my guess. I know that's a once a year thing because it generally aligns with the re-signing of leases. But I bet you Councillor Mara would be able to find out for us and send an email out.
Yes.
Whenever.
Definitely. Yes, and that is the wait list. My apologies.
It struck me as a really significant drop in the wait list for a month over month, and thus prompted me to ask a question. But I'm sure we'll get more information.
I will get you the answer.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Thank you for that. Any questions for Councillor McCallum? Seeing none, we'll now move to administrative updates. And we'll start with Section A, CAO's office. Any questions there? Of course, the motion that was made to Alberta municipalities was supported with over 80% support, and so Alberta municipalities will now be taking that as one of their advocacy issues. Councillor McCallum?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that publicly that it was a surprise to me, as I'm sure it was to my colleagues, that there are municipalities that don't have any services at all. Immediately after the vote, I reached out to the mayor of Sylvan Lake, and because, you know, for them, something was better than nothing, and I completely understand that perspective, but at the same time, we shouldn't be taking crumbs, or fighting over crumbs is what I see it as to a certain extent. But I'm hoping, I reached out to the mayor of Sylvan Lake and asked if there was anything that our council could do to support them in their quest for that, and I think that we might be hearing from them in the future as to be able to support, and I'm happy to wrangle up any municipality they want to try and write a letter on their behalf, because I think it's something that we all deserve in this province at minimum. But anyways, yeah, thanks.
Moving on to Section B, municipal services. Any questions there? Councillor Faubert?
Thank you. Under Community Social Development, C, Income Support, New Online Application Service, I just wanted to flag and ask if Alberta government is no longer providing in-person appointments and our FCSF staff have to fill that gap, are we considering this a form of provincial downloading?
Yes.
Dr. Cotto.
That's a great question. We're still pulling together the provincial downloading inventory. A lot of that is financial. This is one of those things that's harder to quantify, but we can easily add it to the list as one of those unquantifiable, but it is an example, yes.
I would say, like, if we even have to provide a computer terminal station for someone to fill out an online form, like that would, but
We're
yes.
not doing that at this
No?
point. That's
Okay.
mostly the library. I think it's more help for people who are not comfortable using an online system, but I'll clarify. But your point is a good one, and we will make sure we capture it. The list is getting long.
Thank you. I'm contributing.
Thank you for that.
Councillor McCallum.
Question.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
I had a quick chance to talk to Economic Development yesterday about the food truck program, but just 2 applications and only 1 approved. I really look forward to our findings and learnings there. and really hope that we can be more successful in the future.
Did you have a question?
Statement.
Okay. Anything for corporate services? D, municipal infrastructure. Okay, we'll move to item G1, council resolution action list. Any questions on that? Seeing none, we will now, of course, there's the correspondence there. We'll now move to in camera. So I will move that this is I1. I'll move that the Committee of the Whole take the meeting in camera to prevent disclosure of information related to contractual or other negotiations of the public body in accordance with Section 25, Sub 1, Sub C, Sub 3 of the Freedom of Information Protection Privacy Act. Okay. We're going to first of all have this motion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We're now